Hello, everybody. Those buttons there. Am I recording? Hello, everybody, and welcome to Life in Bold. This is a kind of Summer Friday series that I'm doing. I'm pretty excited about it. At my job, I have a Summer Friday situation happening, which is basically where every Friday for July and August, which it is July, not August, but it is July, I get off of work at 1 p.m. on Fridays. I thought to myself, what can I do with that extra time? Because I'm somebody who doesn't have an absolute ton of time to be like doing extra projects and all of that stuff. But that extra 4 hours can really bring me a lot of joy, can bring me a lot of creative expression and creative satisfaction. And you know what I have been missing in my life is the podcast Life in Bold. I know I've made a couple of episodes where I've talked about, coming back, or I'm slowly entering the era of my life where I can be back on the podcast. This is episode 76. And one of the things they say about podcasting, I know if you're a listener, you know this, but it takes about 100 episodes to break through. And it takes, unfortunately, 100 consecutive, consistent episodes. I don't know that I have that, but I have been working on this podcast for 3 or 4 years now. And I'm pretty excited to introduce essentially like a Summer Friday solo series with Life in Bold. And the thing that I want to talk about today, which is it's exciting to me because I feel like 1 year ago, I wouldn't have believed what I'm telling you today. And it's exciting to me because I'm living a reality that I don't think that I believed in anymore. And I wanted to help people kind of see the other side if they're in a dark time, if they're in a tough time, if money is tight, if you are experimenting with ideas and they're not working, if you are somebody who is just kind of getting at life with a vigor and with an excitement and with a choose, challenge, live life in bold mentality, but it's just not 100% like clicking. Like this was me last year at this time in 2025. I was very much like ambitious. I was excited. I was happy. I was working toward a goal. I had purpose. I wasn't depressed. I was not laying in bed. I was not skipping meals. I was not worried about going outside. I was somebody who was like presenting as a very happy, functioning person. But you know what? Like it was tough and it was rocky and it was hard to manage money and payments and getting places where I needed to go financially. The kind of crux of all of it that I've learned is like my friend Stephanie, my very good friend Stephanie, had recommended at one point that I get a part-time job because I honestly was doing my side hustle, my photo booth business. I was doing it as a full-time business, and it was really, really fun to do. I was building the website all the time. I was going out and networking. I was going out and kind of doing sales, and I was like emailing and going out and actually doing the photo booth events. And like, to be clear, like I'm still doing that. However, I added something to my life that changed pretty much everything. And I'm pretty excited to share some details about kind of a positive story that like we don't always get to hear positive stories in 2026. And I don't want to pretend that everything in my life is dandy. And I don't want to pretend that just because my own situation has improved, that A, it's completely fixed, or B, that I'm not paying attention to what's going on in the world, which is just completely hard to handle and just very like something that you have to do and something that you have to be able to be aware of, but something you also have to be able to move forward in your own life. Anyway, my name is Ben Hawes. I'm the host of Life in Bold, and today we're going to be talking about essentially like one way that somebody could go about changing their life. If you're feeling down, if you want to feel higher, if you want to feel better, if you want to feel more secure, this is going to be the episode for you. Because it's been something that has been so interesting for me to follow, like my own journey. I don't know if you've ever followed your own journey, but like sometimes you're just like down, and you're just like absolutely like, holy crap, what am I going to do? That was me probably around October or November of 2025. And as I sit here on July 10th, let's say, just because I don't know when I'm going to put it out, but it's probably going to be July 10th when I put it out, I am feeling happier. I'm feeling more secure. I'm feeling more confident. I'm feeling like I'm dating. I'm feeling like I'm making friends. I feel like I am connecting with my own soul. I'm connecting with my own boldness, and I'm connecting with my family, the people in my life. I'm stronger. I am healthier, to be honest. My blood pressure is doing well. My weight, not that that matters, is doing well, but my heart rate is doing well and all of that stuff. My friend Stephanie again asked me today, how are you doing? And I was like, I'm kind of great. And, of course, you don't want to gloat when things are going well. And maybe for somebody else, they're in the middle of their challenge. They're at the bottom of a valley or whatever. But for me, I think that I had this idea of kind of like taking that question, how am I doing? And taking also a coffee conversation I had with my friend Carrie this morning, just about like how, we're all on this search for kind of having it all, right? Like we want to have a great home. We want to have a great friendship with people, and we want to have a great social circle, and we want to have, love, and we want to have a job, and we want to have we want to be able to go shopping when we want to go shopping and save for retirement and all this stuff. And like as millennials, like it is very difficult to find yourself unemployed or underemployed or without a job or on a career break or whatever it is. And the thing that I always like to say in this situation is like, even if you're doing well, like I asked somebody today, like, how's your business going? And they're like, oh, it's so great. It's growing. I'm working with some great brands, things like this. Even so, it's harder financially to run your own business, especially in the first, let's say, just 5 years or whatever, than it is to just have a job. Harder financially. Jobs are hard. I will give you that. Entrepreneurship is hard. I will totally give you that. But financially, to have a paycheck come and just cover your rent is such a different situation than not having that. And my uncle used a great word this weekend when I was back in Washington State for the 4th of July. He was like, "Oh, you were kind of unemployed for 2 years, huh? Like it was like 1 year of this and 1 year of that." And he used the word scrounging. You're scrounging for money, and whether or not you make a lot or a little, you're scrounging. Like every dollar you make is dollars that you have to then pay for something, or, even if you're investing, even if it's health insurance, even if it's something responsible and like dutiful and like perfect for you to spend money on, every dollar you spend, you have to earn that yourself. So what I'm saying is like, I ultimately was in a situation where, obviously I got a job. I don't think that June Ben 2025 was wanting to get a job. I think he was holding out for an outcome where ultimately I would have made it as an entrepreneur. It's really funny to think about because making it as an entrepreneur is a really very, very interesting metric, because you have to be able to understand that even if let's say you're gonna get $100,000 from your company, from your business, from your own business, you yourself are going to extract 100,000 pre-tax dollars from your business. What that means is that has to be profit. It has to be money that is extra from the business, not money that you're spending on Ubers, not money that you're spending on supplies, not money that you're spending to pay to build your website. Like it's very tempting to reinvest, to put money back into your business. But at the end of the day, you have rent and you have groceries and like you have a phone bill and you have things that you have to pay for. And so I'm just like in a moment of my life where I'm very grateful for the job that I have gotten. And the job I've gotten is at a company, and I'm an office manager, and I am having a lot of fun. I really like the people. I'm 6 months in. This is my 6th month anniversary. And so I wanted to make a podcast to kind of talk about what's possible and encourage people to not only dream bigger, like that's always kind of on my plate of things that I want to serve to people as like an option, like to dream bigger and think bigger and allow yourself to have a big mentality on what might happen for your life, but to also like raise your expectations if that's something that you're interested in doing. Like I think that we are conditioned to believe that we cannot have a good situation. I always think about Sex in the City. Like you can have a boyfriend, an apartment, and a job, but you can only have 2 of those 3 things. I was talking to someone, earlier today, my friend Carrie, and she was talking about how like, if you can like enjoy 4 out of 5 tasks in your job, like that's great. And like, I think that I have been in situations in my career, like both as an entrepreneur and as an employed American, that like people want to stretch to find purpose. People want to stretch to find satisfaction. And it's hard to find a job that you like. It's hard to find a job that you like. Let's just say that. A, it's hard to find a job. B, it's hard to find a job that you like And C is like it takes a long time to even understand what kind of job you might like. I think that like it's ultimately 10 years of career that it's taken me to find a way to like my job. I started off in customer service. I've been in sales. I've done stuff with marketing. I've done stuff with account management. I've been in HR, learning and development. And ultimately, I'm in talent engagement now. And the idea of my job is to increase engagement and ultimately increase attendance at the office that we have. I have a 20 desk office in New Union Square that I run, and I am in charge of bringing people in and getting them excited about coming to the office. There's maybe 30, 40, potentially 45 people that could come into the office any day of the week. And it's my job to make them want to and to get them excited about coming into the office and like finding meaning and finding purpose and finding connection and finding a way to make the office work for them. So I do events, I do programming, I do surprise parties, I have lunch served, I do, something called Smoothie Tuesdays, I plan holiday parties. I'm really like making the office a fun place. And the reason that this is so up my alley is because I have always done that. Every job I've ever had, every position I've ever held has always been to make the place that we are at better. I was an RA in college. Like that's what I was doing. I was throwing events. I was handling conflict. I was helping guide people, advise people, even on their classes and like helping them see the bigger picture of when they were going to graduate, things like that. Before that, I was the student body president. I was in the leadership class at high school and I was in California and I was like leading the class through homecoming and dances and things that were supposed to be fun. And the thing about fun that people miss, because I think people think that there's work and then there's fun. And if there's work, then you have to be serious. And if there's fun, then it has no connection to productivity. That's wrong. That's dead wrong. And if you can allow fun to happen, if you can allow joking to happen, if you can allow people to kind of be who they are while they're doing their work. And again, that sounds woo-woo. It sounds wishy-washy, but it's not. The business of fun is so important. If people can find the time for 5 or 10 minutes a day to have some fun, to laugh, to connect with somebody, to be friends with somebody, to engage with somebody, to engage with a conversation about whether or not they agree with something, or even to talk shit. It is so much better than if you are alone at your job. I'm not talking in this moment about in office versus working from home, but I am talking about connection. I'm talking about the ability to laugh and the ability to connect. It is so important at work. Because what is the biggest expense to companies in terms of employment, in terms of people? The biggest expense is when they have to replace people or when they have to train people or hire people or, ultimately like do anything besides retain the people, which is why it's so surprising to me that so many companies have this like idea that like you'll be lucky to work here kind of thing. I think it definitely has to do with the job market in general, but for the company, it is in the company's best interest to be able to retain employees. And in my opinion, in my 10 years of experience and expertise, I would say that connection is one of the huge pieces of why somebody would stay at a company. In times that I've felt like leaving jobs, the number one reason that I don't is because I feel connected. I feel like I don't want to let somebody down. I feel like I like seeing someone every day, whether that's on Zoom or not. I feel like I feel connected to them, and it's the people. When you ask somebody, why do you like your job? My dad is in his 60s now, and he spent 35 years working at a company, the same company, and if you asked him, like, what did you like about your job? He would probably only mention the traditions and the people and the things that he did and the conversations that he had and the ability he had to connect with people. I don't think he would have ever said, even though he was good at his job, even though he cared about his job, even though he cared about his impact, if you asked him after he retired, What was the thing that you enjoyed most about your job? What was the thing that brought you the most meaning? What was the thing that made you feel like going to work every day and earning money for your family was worth it? I know he would say, "Oh, I met this person, I met that person. This person and I are golfing even now." Like he would be so completely like talking about the people. Yeah, he might say like, I really liked getting to travel to this thing to, get to work on this requisition or something like that. Like he might say something like that. But why did he like it? Because he enjoyed it. He had fun. He felt connected to something. He got to try something. He got to learn something. The second thing I think in addition to communication is really like being able to see a future, being able to see a future that includes compensation. That includes things like learning and development. That includes your ability to say like, hey, like if I stay here, I'm going to get some kind of opportunity that I'm not going to be able to get as easily somewhere else. I think that's a big piece as well. The thing about that opportunity, the thing about that learning and development is it largely comes from connection. Even just things like mentorship. Mentorship, the ability to ask somebody a question. Maybe they're further along in their career than you. Maybe they have an expertise on a software or an industry that you don't have an expertise on. That kind of ability to do that and see that potential and see that opportunity comes from connection. I'm getting to a point here, which is that in addition to, everything that I've just said, I think with connection being so important and connection fueling fun, fueling opportunity, fueling learning and growth, I personally think that going to an office every now and then can be beneficial to people who that matters to. Let me back up. I am not saying that scientifically or psychologically going to an office is better. Not saying that. Because there's people who work and opportunity and fun and all of that is not the same level of importance. There are people who live away from an office. They don't want to go to an office. They have, friends in their real life. Maybe they have a hobby or a passion outside of work and they get fulfilled by those things. They just want to show up, do their work, and like not have high attachment to the outcome. Those employees can be really fantastic. I remember when I was a customer support associate at ClassPass, we had people on our team, very entry-level team, who were 35 years old and they just wanted to have health insurance, a paycheck, but they were good at their jobs. And they just came in, they showed up on time, they got there, they did their work. They weren't trying to get mentorship. They weren't trying to figure out how to further their career because a lot of them had something else they were working on, or they were kind of saving up for another education opportunity that they were going to go into an entirely different career. And like what they were doing at ClassPass didn't affect their future in the same way that it did for someone like me. I think that the thing to talk about when it comes to this topic of like in office or like coming back to the office or figuring out how to get people engaged at work, etc., because this is like my kind of bread and butter. I don't know if you can tell, but like I love the idea when it comes to professional like work. I love the idea of like making the place better. I do remember like in high school being like the student body president, and like even when we were doing like our floats and dances and stuff like that, even when we were doing the work of the student body president, my goal for like the people who were there working was to make it fun, playing music, making sure everybody had clarity on what they needed to do, and like making sure that if somebody wasn't having fun, like finding something that they do have fun with, or whatever. I'm the guy who makes things fun in situations that are kind of stressful often. Even in college, like I feel like I was the guy who was figuring out how to make college fun in the serious parts. College is fun. Class, not so fun. Living in a dorm, potentially fun, but has a lot of drawbacks. I was the guy who's planning the events and helping people understand what's expected of them in their living situation, etc. I'm the guy who's like navigating the rules, and helping them understand like, hey, this is what's okay and this is what's not okay, and here's the gray area in between. Like people ask me all the time my style as a RA, like what were you like as an RA? And I think they can tell. Like, obviously, I was the kind of RA where my objective was for you to have a good time. I don't care about, personally, I don't care about the rules. I don't necessarily personally care if a 20-year-old is drinking alcohol. That's not my big value. My big value is that that 20-year-old feels like they're having a good time. I don't know where that comes from, but it goes back to my very first job at a water park, goes to my next job at an arcade, goes to my next job at a family photography studio. Like, I am obsessed with making sure people have fun. So I was asked and I was tasked with being able to increase office participation, increase office attendance for the company I'm working for. And I just got kind of like a 6-month feedback situation, whatever. And I grew the attendance year over year between 2025 and 2026. Of course, there are a number of factors, but it was my OKR. It was my objective to increase the attendance. I increased it by over double or triple what I was supposed to. And that's not to gloat on that. I mean, that's just kind of like really exciting for me personally, but it's not going to excite you as much. But I believe that some of these like principles that I have ultimately helped me guide my day-to-day actions that led everybody to come into the office more often. And I think at the end of the day, like what I'm doing at work is like keeping the kitchen stocked. I'm planning, happy hours. I am doing the fun stuff, but I'm also like navigating people's daily frustrations in a way. I mean, people aren't truly complaining to me, but like what people like about me sitting there in the office is like there's always going to be somebody there. I think is a big piece. Like, if you go to the office, it's not going to be completely empty. And if at some point you go like, oh, I might ask you like, oh, what's going on? And if you are pacing around, I might go, oh, are you bored? And start a conversation. And I think there's such a value in that. And I've actually seen a lot of like on LinkedIn, like I've seen a lot of jobs pop up that are these jobs like workplace experience manager or whatever, where people are realizing that they want to bring people back to an office and they need somebody to ultimately like do it. And sometimes people are remote and they like being remote. And bringing them to the office is kind of difficult because there's a number of statistics. I think I was reading today, and I'm not going to remember the number, but it's something like 70 or 80% of people would consider quitting their job if returning to the office full time was required. That's a daunting statistic. Like, the people don't want to be required to go back to the office, like at all. And it's really interesting because there's a misalignment because a lot of leaders believe that if people come to the office, they'll be more productive. Really interesting kind of back and forth. But the thing is, if somebody likes working from home, they're going to find evidence that working from home is better, like for everybody. If somebody enjoys coming to the office or they feel more productive in the office, they're going to be able to find evidence that working in an office is better for everyone. If you are a leader or a CEO or a head of people or whatever, if you believe one or the other, you should run your company that way. If you believe that working from home is more productive because people get freedom, they can do a 4-day work week, things like that. They will trust you more. They'll be more engaged. You can pay less, whatever it needs to be, like for you to justify working from home. That's what your company should do. If your company is led by a CEO who's like, hey, everybody needs to be in the office, that company should be an office company, whether it's 5 days a week or 2 days a week or optional or mandated or whatever. Like, the thing that people are missing in the conversation, in my opinion, is this idea that like there's a one size fits all situation that's going to just like be the answer. The truth is that we don't have like a ton of like long-term data on like 10 or 20 or 30 years on like whether or not it's good to work from home or from an office in comparison to each other in these times. So we're all kind of working with like this kind of gray area world where like some people disagree with other people and those people think this and we think that. And like my kind of conclusion is that for the time being, do what works for you. If you work for a company that's requiring you to come to an office and that's going to make you miserable, I would say look for another job. And if you're working at a company that's only offering remote and you are an office person and you're feeling like, oh my God, I'm stuck at home, I'm not as healthy, I'm not as connected, find a job that allows you to go to an office or find somewhere that allows you to co-work or whatever. But like, there's no answer for like, working from home is more productive. And I see that so often on LinkedIn. You should end every sentence about working from home or working from an office with, for me. You should say, working in an office is more productive for me. Working at home is so much more blah, blah, blah for me. It's not something that's going to be a one size fits all, which kind of brings me to another point for companies making decisions about how they're going to like be able to get people back into the office. I'm not ever going to advocate for laying people off, but if you have decided that you are an in-person, at least, you know, for the most part company, and you have hired somebody that's 300 miles away and never going to come into your office, like the thing is, like that person isn't right for your company strategy. And yes, you hired them because you apparently don't know what you want, and you don't know that you were going to require everybody to come to the office. You tried to take advantage of the pandemic and like hire someone for less money potentially. But like, if you're somebody who's running a company and you're like, hey, everybody needs to be in the office, so you're let go or you need to move to another city or whatever, like, no, like you made a mistake. You hired somebody that you shouldn't have hired. That's kind of my take on it. I don't know if everybody agrees with that, but like that's kind of how I feel when it comes to like this whole conversation of like what to do with the people who you've hired that now you're deciding that people need to come to an office. I just think it's kind of a mess. I think that we're in a situation that's kind of a mess. Now, 2019 was like a dream year for like office attendance. Like it was something that people were going to the office. I mean, maybe they were taking a certain number of days off, or maybe they were, you know, I don't know, people taking time off for their weddings or their honeymoons or like parental leave, things like that. But like for the large portion of the population, like most people were going into an office for the majority of time. And they were also staying late. They were also like really committed to this like office life. And then 2020 happened and we all were like, fuck that. I don't want to go to an office. And some of us stuck to it. And some of us were like, I kind of missed going to an office. I'll tell you from my own perspective, going to an office every day has improved almost every metric in my life. Yes, when I was working from home at my last job, it was easier to take breaks. Yes, sometimes I'm at the office and I want to get in my bed, or I want to do my dishes, or I want to do my laundry. I will totally give you that. But for me, it has improved every metric of my life. I happen to go 5 days a week. I don't necessarily think that everybody is supposed to go 5 days a week, but it has improved every metric in my life. I am spending less money on groceries. Hey, that's a good one. I'm spending less money on groceries. I'm getting outside every single day because I have to get to work. I am walking around the city, and that's really healthy for me. I'm buying better clothes because I have to be at the office wearing pants. And I have to kind of have a t-shirt or a nice collared shirt or a polo shirt. Like I'm able to be the version of myself that I imagined that when I was working from home, it's hard to be, because any day of the week, especially as somebody who lives alone, it's very possible I'm not leaving my apartment. So all of that to say, I'm kind of considering this an expertise of mine, employee engagement as it relates to office culture, as it relates to in-office attendance. I do have a lot of perspectives and values and like situations where I'm talking to people about what works and what doesn't work. And the thing is, like, what works and doesn't work is such a funny way to look at it, because there's just not going to be something that works or doesn't work that you can cut and paste and like put on every company. There's not a list of 10 things you can do in order to get to a place where everybody's coming to the office and they're all enthusiastic about it. The thing is, like, people are afraid. People are worried that if they have to come to the office, they're going to be really committed to their jobs, and they've taken on all these identities and they've taken on hobbies and they've started families and they've moved further away from the office because they didn't need to come in. I was looking at it today and like I think there's 28% of like leaders and CEOs and startup founders and people who are making these decisions, 28% of them are looking to increase attendance compared to 3% who are looking to go more remote. So 3% of leaders are trying to go more remote. They think that's the right direction. 28% of leaders are going more into the office. Depending on how you look at it, like that's a trend. That's a way that things are going, at least as an experiment. And I think it's interesting for people to decide what they're on board with or what they're not on board with. So that's the kind of work that I'm doing at my current job. That's the kind of projects that I'm working on. It's how can we entice people to come in? How can we get people to be excited and enthusiastic about having connection at work? I think the bottom line of coming into an office versus not is what's going to retain your talent. If you're going to retain talent and you have good talent, you have top talent, people who are high performers, people who are allowing your company to thrive and they're remote, keep them. That's great. If you're somebody who feels that you need to have people in the office in order for them to be productive, great. Like, I think that there's a lot of conversations and opinions, but in reality, like you got to just kind of look at like the data and be willing to experiment with things and be willing to fail at the end of the day. I think we can look forward, but there's not a lot to look back at. We know that for the last 100 years, people worked in an office or whatever number of years. And then for the last 6 years, people really enjoyed working from home. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And a lot of people like working from home 2 days a week and coming to the office 3 days a week, working from home 3 days a week and coming in twice a week. Like ultimately, it's not a situation where you can say, this is what works for everybody. What you can do is say, this is what works for me. And you can say, if you're the leader, this is what works for my team. This is what works for my company. I think it's really interesting that everybody wants to put an argument out and plant their flag that this is what works for everybody. That's not the way that people work. That's not the way that humans work. At the very least, there's introverts and there's extroverts. There's going to be people who like being on their own and having the privacy and the quiet. There's going to be people who are energized by a conversation in the kitchen. With an office, you can mandate it. You can entice people to come in, or you can just say like, do whatever you want, or you can say we're completely fully remote. But you have to be able to plant your flag as the leader, and you have to be able to plant your flag as the employee who's making a decision. Like I think what it's really important to know is it's just something that is custom to each person and custom to each company. Anyway, all of that to say, that's the kind of work that I'm doing. That's the kind of thing that I'm passionate about. I'm starting to consider like helping more people understand like that with my content, or maybe with being on podcasts, or like maybe speaking to HR groups or whatever it is. Because I was able to exceed the goal so profoundly, with like bringing people into the office, I think it's something that I'm interested in talking about, and it's something that I've always been interested in talking about, but I haven't like nailed the like idea of like what is it that I talk about on the internet, especially in contrast to my comedy and the other things that I do in the Life in Bold podcast brand and things like that. The thing that I really want to drive home in this kind of part 3 of this podcast episode is like, you can find a job that you can talk about like this. You can find a job or a career or a position or an opportunity that gets you this juiced up. I think that's the piece that's like really important for me for the Life in Bold listeners. If you're like listening to this episode and you're like, what's Ben talking about? He's such a nerd about employee engagement. Like, what are you a nerd about? I want to know. Like, if you are listening right now and you're like on YouTube or whatever, like leave a comment about like professionally, like what are you a nerd about? Or is it just comedy, or is it just performance, or is it just sports, or is it just music, or whatever? Like, because I am somebody who is multi-hyphenate. I'm a multifaceted diamond, as my life coach will call me sometimes. And there's just like different parts of me that light up different parts of me. Like, I'm just somebody who likes talking about like getting people to have fun. I want to like kind of wrap this up by talking about 2025 me versus 2026 me, because it is such a stark difference in my level of confidence and happiness. And I just genuinely want to like instill a little bit of like, hey, like if you're in a situation that sucks right now, if you've like lost a job or like you've lost friends or like you've lost like a person that you love or whatever it is, like I think that the thing to like really point out is like a year can change everything. And like you actually can aim for a life where you have most of what you want. Like, I really do now believe that, like, it's not okay to be like, yeah, you can only have two of those three things. Or, like, people are like, if you can like 80% of your job and like one day a week, it sucks. That's great. Like, yeah, that's great compared to people who hate their job 5 days a week. It's not great for you, a Life in Bold listener who is trying to achieve a level of like fruition, a level of like achievement in identity that like you're trying to live your life in bold. Do you know what I mean? So like part of living your life in bold is continuing to push through on the challenge and to see a bigger picture. Not that you have to be certain on what that bigger picture is, but like to be able to like take a moment and to breathe and to understand your current situation and have the self-awareness and the courage to take yourself to the next level. That to me is life in bold. It almost makes me emotional to think about because I took daily decisions. I took moments, I took steps, and I was able to get myself to a place where I committed to a change, and I ultimately networked my way into a great opportunity. And I just like, I feel like in this world of like jobs and the job market and LinkedIn and like remote work versus office work and all of that, like it's really hard to imagine yourself really liking your job. I want to be an example of somebody who was like able to push through like a really, really tough time. And like, I will not be shy about the fact that I had a lot of luck in building this kind of expertise and being able to be a kind of a shoe-in for the job that I ultimately got. But like, it is seriously sad to me that like we believe that we can't have a job that we like, or that we believe that like it's too risky to shift roles, or it's too risky, or like, oh, I want this, but I'll give myself 2 more years in this role to see like la la la. Like, I think money is so much less important than being aligned in what you're spending your time doing. There's so many conversations about how time is like the invaluable resource that we all have. I think that we do so much mental gymnastics to convince ourselves that we're happy and that we're fine and that we're satisfied with like what we're doing and how our lives are going. And it's just like sad to me, I guess, that like we're conditioned to feel that we can't have it all when it comes to that. I know you can't have it all in general. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Like that, I know that phrase. I've heard that phrase. But like I'm currently, I'll say currently in a situation that feels really good to me. And when people ask me how I'm doing, I stand up tall and I say, I'm loving how I'm doing and I am feeling really good and I love my job. My business is making more than it did last year. Like my other ideas around businesses are so structured and so I'm so able to categorize them and organize them and all of that. And like, I'm just in a good spot. Like in this moment, I feel like I'm in a good spot. And I just hit 6 months at this job and like I'm feeling like I can get back into my comedy in a way that feels more active, more sustainable, more growth minded than it has been in the last 6 months, honestly. And I'm really grateful. I'm really like happy to have landed myself in this situation, honestly. And so with that, I'm like, just want to like share the excitement. I want to share the passion, like the idea that you can get there. And like, if you're in a tough position in this moment, you can get out of it. You can get past it. You can move beyond it. And it's not a hustle thing. That's what I really want Life in Bold to not be, is like a hustle culture podcast where it's like send out 150 resumes, like that's not the brand of Life in Bold. That's not the brand of Ben Hawes HQ. What the brand is like, hey, if you can align yourself and you can be out there and you can choose courage and you can choose challenge and you can be the person who's like out there saying what you want, even if it's a temporary thing that you want and you don't know the bigger vision, that's Life in Bold. And I think that's my message for today is like, in addition to everything that I shared about in-office culture, which is so nerdy. I don't know how much of that I'm going to keep in, but like this idea that like I have found something that like I didn't think was possible. I thought corporate was over for me. I lost all faith that like a company had my back. I lost all faith that like a leader cared about me as a person. Now, I don't know if the faith is back, but like the attachment that I had to those two things being true was too high before. Now I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll leave or lose this job in 2 years, 3 years, whatever. And ultimately, like I am not going to see 90% of the people ever again. Like, but it's okay. It's just okay. It's just what I do is connection. What I do is fun. And I'm allowing myself to be like a high commitment person with low attachment to the outcome of like, if I keep this job forever. You know what I mean? So like, I just want to share that sentiment that like you, the listener here of Life in Bold, you're able to get where you want to go, even if it's really, really tough. And I just want to put that messaging out there. I want you to hear it and I want you to believe it, even though it's very hard to believe it. And just keep putting yourself out there, keep pushing and choosing challenge and being able to communicate what you're looking for and what you want. Whether that's a job, whether it's a relationship, whether it's being friends with somebody, whether it's a new apartment, whether it's a project you're working on that you're trying to start, a business, maybe. Just freaking go out and live your life in bold. With that, my name is Ben Hawes, and I hope you have a great day, an even better week. And do not forget, like literally in this moment, I feel it so strongly. Do not forget to live every day, to live your life in bold. Thank you.